camera working first, and that's been the biggest challenge.
Yeah, James has had to learn a lot about it really quickly.
Yeah, you can teach me because Jeffrey and I are fighting with it, and so you can teach me and pass that forward.
Awesome. Should I ping for you to co-host it as well on BridgeCon? Let's see. Should auto-host, yeah. The wonders of Twitch. All the platforms, guys. All the platforms.
All the platforms. Can you hear the seashore?
Oh wow, that's coming. That's what the folks hear right now. The inspirational intro music. Hello. Hello. I feel like they don't even need an introduction at this point in the PowerShell community. They come with their own reputation preceding them. Yeah.
Well, just to get the formalities out of the way. Hey, everybody, I'm Jason. I'm a PM on the PowerShell team. And I don't know how you see him on the screen, but I'm really excited to be joined by one of my PowerShell heroes, Steve Lee. Hey, Steve.
Well, we're coworkers now, but yeah, I'm Steve. I'm the engineer manager for the PowerShell team.
Doesn't mean that I don't bow to him in the mornings, even if you can't see it. It's just, yeah, yes, that's right. Absolutely. You got it. Yeah. So we've been really looking forward to talking about this, and the best part is as we've started to talk about it, the engineers have been working pretty hard. We've got new demos, new code to show you, and we're very excited about this conversation on shell improvements and modernizing in the next gen shell. Adele, he's not allowed to be on the call.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, Jason. You know what? I actually, folks, I recently switched to PowerShell 7.2 with Windows Terminal. That's been really great. I've been really surprised. I held off for a while when it was in preview and stuff, but it's been phenomenally stable and really great. I love how it connects into Azure Cloud Shell and all the other platforms automatically in WSL2 as well, as long as you're on Windows 2004. But yeah, yes. Pretty slick, pretty slick.
And you're not on the current release. What's the matter with you?
James, it's brew cask upgrade. Come on. Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, do you want me to share my screen now? Well, okay. Well, I have a couple of slides. I actually have slides, and if you've seen me present before, I usually don't have very many, but I do have a couple of slides. So the screen share thing is a good thing, and I have some demos as well to show you. Yeah.
Very cool.
About another 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, just let me just do this. First of all, thank you guys. Thanks to PowerShell.org and the DevOps Collective and all y'all for hosting us for this great conversation on modern and next-gen shell. And we appreciate, we're really sorry about the conference being canceled, all that kind of stuff, but we really want to be able to join you and show our support. You guys do such great work, and we really appreciate all of the help. How's that for a 30-second?
That was a great intro. Jason.
That was awesome.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, yeah.
Although I was just
you're getting pretty much. Okay.
Yeah,
I will just really quickly, sorry, not to interrupt, but I will quickly say thank you so much, Jason and Steve, for making the time. It's I know it can be a little bit hard with schedules always to find time and make that time, but y'all did a great job of making yourselves available for us. So we really appreciate it because we know both your time is very valuable. So I will say that up front. We do appreciate your making that work.
I think everyone's time is valuable, but I think I personally really enjoy these kind of engagements with the community. So thank you for inviting us.
Awesome. Okay,
yeah, so
James,
I'll be quiet now. You're good. So I was just informed that I was muted the whole time, so no one on Twitch actually heard me. But they heard you guys. That's really all that matters.
Okay, that's all that matters. Yeah,
right.
You weren't running PowerShell 7. They don't need to hear it.
James isn't important. He's not using PowerShell 7. Yeah, we'll skip over that.
All right, so Jason, I think we're good. If you will transition over here, and then let's see what your screen looks like.
Okay. Looks like that. And I can't hear you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I keep forgetting I have a hard mute. I'm sorry about that. All right, we're good. Yeah, so you're good.
You're good to go, Jason.
Yeah, I'm just
awesome.
gonna
Guys,
I'm gonna resize this a little bit.
Tell me. Okay, but make sure you guys tell me to stop screen sharing when we're having a conversation, because I always forget that stuff. I mean, one of the best things about talking about the modern and the next gen shell, I'm going to steal one of Jeffrey Snover's lines. I'm deeply flawed individual too that makes a lot of mistakes. So one of the things that I really like to focus on is how to make my life a little bit easier. And so we would like to talk about making everybody's life a little bit easier. And for the agenda, yeah, we have stuff that we want to show you. And this is the latest and greatest stuff. I ran around to the different engineers that we've been working with on this and got the latest and greatest code to show you. And so without further ado, we're just going to kind of dive right in. First of all, why are we even taking the time to focus on this? Because this stuff is messy. I mean, think about it. Every single time we run into a problem, we invent a new solution, which means we've scripted something, we've automated something, we've built some code around something, and that new something is something that we now have to deal with. And part of the challenge is inventing new solutions all the time as we go. It means other people have to learn them, and we have to find ways for people to be able to work with those solutions. So how do we make it easier for them to be able to use our technologies, which are constantly evolving? So we have to figure out a great way to present it. Now, one of the things is that as we're figuring out new technologies, we figure out ways to present it, and different people come up with brilliant ideas. Well, one of the things that Steve and I want to do is make sure that we're keeping up with those brilliant ideas, whether we've had them, whether somebody else has had them. We want to make sure that the shell is meeting the needs that we need today. And that's the modernization that we're doing. But also, I mean, this is Microsoft. There are people working on some of the most amazing things around here. It would be wrong for us not to go looking around Microsoft to see if there's new ideas and new technologies that nobody's seen yet that we might be able to adapt and supersede some of the current day techniques. Maybe there's things that really push us towards a next generation shell that can invite exploration. And it's not just work that we're doing here. this is work that you can help us with, that you might be doing, and that kind of thing. And Steve, do you think I kind of summed this up pretty well? What do you think?
No, I think that kind of covers it. Like the only thing I'll just add is, I think for folks who use PowerShell a lot, like they really think of PowerShell as like an automation language, and they kind of sometimes forget that it's really a great shell as well. And then I think with like the Windows terminal team, having a 1.0 release, having more usage of like Linux and Azure and stuff, like I think the console is becoming a hotspot again for productivity. And for me, it's really like, what can we do to make PowerShell an even better, just a shell, so it can be more productive? And I think some of the topics you're going to cover will cover some of those ideas.
Well, and let's go ahead and start off with something that I know that most of you have already seen. I want to talk about errors for a minute. This is just so you know, this is the first time that I got to work with Steve. And of course I'm bowing and all that kind of stuff. He is actually one of my PowerShell heroes. But this is the first time we got to work together on a couple of things, and one of them was errors. And what I want to just do is I really want you to see the errors. And sometimes this happens to me. I apologize. I lost my mouse pointer, and I'll get it back. I don't know why it does that sometimes. I want to show you some of the errors. Yes, I know you've seen it. So I just want to show you, I'm running on Windows PowerShell 5.1 right now. I'm going to clear the screen just so you can get an idea. If you haven't seen this before, I'm just going to do GetItem path, and I'll just say to nowhere. Now, traditionally, the errors these have been really good errors. It's just, there's a lot of information on the screen, and that's a good thing because it helps you figure out what the error is. The problem that you run across is, well, if you keep making errors, right? Or if you were to run a script, and this is one of my favorite parts, if you were to run a script, well, it just fills your screen with all of this red stuff. And the problem is your eyes kind of, well, at least my eyes, glaze over, and I start losing focus. I don't actually know what's going on here, and it's hard for me to dial in and focus to this. So one of the first things that we wanted to look at doing was, in trying to modernize the shell, was make this clear. Now, I got to be honest with you. In my head, it was, how can I make this clear? Let's get down to a single kind of concise error message. But that's not where it ended. So let me just show you. I'm on PowerShell 7. I'm going to clear the screen. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do GetItem and path to nowhere. Now, a very single, clear, concise error message, just to tell you what's going on. And here's the interesting thing. It's not just always going to spit back the commandlet, of course, in the error message, because different errors can occur. I'm going to do a divide by 0. And Steve, you might want to jump in on this. You've made these particular errors as concise as you can make them and still providing great information. The difference between an error with a commandlet, or if I get a runtime exception or a parsing exception, stuff like that.
Yeah, it was actually, so most of this is actually done in the formatting system. So it's basically a very complicated PowerShell script that is in one of our default format XMLs. And through trial and error and just like, working through a lot of scenarios, it turns out that there's a lot of different types of errors. You can get exceptions or error records, and then error records have nested exceptions, blah, blah, all this stuff. So a lot of time, and I appreciate a lot of the feedback that the community kind of provided early on in the previews of 7.0 to kind of help clean this up. It took a lot of iterations, to be honest, to kind of get it to where it is today. I'm sure it's still not perfect. We still found a few issues, but we've been fixing those as they come up. So, but for me, it's a better experience than the default in Windows 5.1, where you just get a screen full of red. And that was one of the feedback that we got from the community early on. Is like, is there something we knew about that?
Well, and the thing is, the excitement on the error messages didn't end, and he's right. This took a lot of iterations, but it took even more iterations because we were both talking about this, and it's like, wouldn't it be cool if, since PowerShell already knows whether you're typing interactively at the shell or if you're running something from a script, wouldn't it be better to produce a better error message if you were focused on scripting as opposed to a concise error message when you're focused on interactively typing things? So when you run a script, and I'm just going to run a script that has a single error in it, the error message changes. And this is one of the things I have just become really passionate about and that we're doing is it tries to visually grab you and pull you into the code that you want to see. So it shows you line 8, shows you the line, and it gives you a squiggly, but wait, I got better, it gets better, it gets better. So that you can really visualize how it looks in the code. You can jump back in the script and you know what you're looking for. But where it gets really exciting, well, I think additionally exciting, is when you start to look at something like in VS Code, and I'm just going to run this, and this, every line makes an error, is the idea. Well, instead of filling up your screen with a whole bunch of just red screen stuff, now you get these very clear and concise error messages. And this is going to be hard to see on my screen, so I'm going to kind of highlight it for you. But let me go to an error that's occurring here on line 7. And you notice where the red squiggly is? It says, oh, look, hey, man, you misspelled the word property, which if you've watched me do a demo before, you know that I constantly misspell. So I can hit Control-click, and it'll take me right in VS Code to that line in the code. And what I'm going to do is highlight it for you, because you couldn't see it if I actually did this, if I clicked on it. But it would drop my cursor right here at the word property, right at the very beginning of it. So it takes me right to that error message. Steve, these visual representation of errors I have found to be super helpful. Why don't you talk about where this came from and how you started working with this?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things I'll just talk about. One is, I think for the actual visual aspect, when we're kind of like looking at, hey, what's the best way to kind of represent this information so it's very easy to consume? We actually took a lot of inspiration from Rust. Like I happened to come across some blog posts about them updating how they show errors, and we kind of took a little adaptation. It's not exactly what they use, but it's kind of similar in some regards, and it just works really well. And I think that's part of like open source, right? It's like if there's a great idea, don't reinvent the wheel here. Just use it and improve upon it if you can. The other thing is what Jason just showed is kind of specific to VS Code. Like the formatting actually detects that it's in VS Code and actually adds the column information. Like if you look on that select object line, it says 7:96. Whereas when he was running it interactively in the regular shell, it doesn't have that information because it's just not useful, and it actually makes it harder to read for some folks to understand what that syntax means. So there's some additional logic in there to kind of handle these special cases. There's actually one other case, Jason, if you want to go back to the shell that I did specifically because it kind of annoyed me. So why don't you go to Windows PowerShell first to see what it shows. And I have to apologize because this is come out like a live demo. We didn't rehearse this part, so we'll see if anything. But if you just type like a 1, just the number 1, and then pipe it to should, and then space. I'm assuming you have Pester on here. Space -B, and just do a 2. No,
I don't. Oh.
BE.
What was that?
You don't have a newer version of Pester.
Yeah, fine. I don't have a newer version of Pester on here. Go
back to PowerShell 7 real quick. We can do the same thing. And just have one pipe to should-BE2. Yeah, hit enter. Then what you should see, I'm not sure why this went a little bit slow. Oh, okay. You still don't have a newer version of Pester, right?
Yeah, I don't have it.
You need at least, I think, Pester 4 to be able to run should directly. In this case, we're not going to spend time writing like a whole test here, but the key thing here is really before, if you try to like do some tests on that interactively using the should, then you would get this kind of like a weird error message. But Pester actually returns an error record that actually has useful information inside of it that's kind of custom. So we detect that if that's available, we actually show that instead of what PowerShell would normally show. So it actually makes it kind of like a nice experience. But anyways.
I mean, you could always install Pester live.
Yeah. Okay, let's not tempt the demo gods too much, but I have to say that these features, specifically the highlighting on the specific typo, I will say you have probably saved my forehead some banging on some keyboards specifically with that. Yeah, because sometimes you're just sitting there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, gee, I like that, but I like the ISE and all that stuff, you guys know that you can flip VS Code to make it look just like ISE. So there's no reason not to use VS Code. Even if you love the way the ISE does stuff, you can use it right here. So it's all good. So one other thing I wanted to show you with errors is you make an error, and a lot of you have seen this, that now we have a command called getError that would let you go through and see the errors and give you all the details of the error. So a lot of improvements in the error handling kind of helped us get started with some of the improvements that we did. I have a few notes here, and I'm going to give James the slides if you're interested. You can change, by the way, this, we call it the concise view. So $error view is currently, its default is concise view. But if you prefer the old-fashioned normal view, you can go back to that and category view that have been in PowerShell since the beginning. So you're more than welcome to go back to that at any time. Now, just a couple of other things is, oh boy, a couple of other things. We got some major things. Native commands. And Steve, this is where we're going to shift gears, guys. We're going to talk about native commands. These are commands that are designed to run on a specific platform. They do a specific thing with specific technologies, and they should just work in PowerShell, Steve, right? I mean, it should just work. If I got PowerShell and I want to start typing Docker or something like that, it should just work.
Yeah, I mean, because PowerShell is a shell, you would expect that if you find like some tutorial on Kubernetes, like kubectl or Docker, you cut and paste that command line into PowerShell. Ideally, it should just work. Now, of course, there's some complications there where it has some syntax like an @ sign or a brace or something like that, the PowerShell might try to interpret as script. Things tend to fail. And to be honest, having looked into that, it's actually a really hard problem to solve, to figure out, did the user intend for that to look like PowerShell or not? But there are other cases that, I think Jason's going to demo that we did have some improvements so that they work more than they did before.
Well, yeah, why don't you talk about, it was one of the improvements that you've been working on, PS native path resolution as a great example of commandlets should just work.
Yeah, so I think in PowerShell Core 6.2 is when we introduced the temp drive. So everyone may not be aware, like, if you're working across macOS, Linux, and Windows, the environmental variable for the temp drive is different. Like it's, I think, TEMP on Windows, TMP on Linux, and maybe TMP dir on macOS or something like that. There's no reason to have to remember that. So the temp drive is always there. It maps to the user's temp drive automatically. Now, one of the things that bothered me is like if I'm trying to use Notepad or Nano or VI or something like that, I can't just do nano temp : foo, whatever, because only PowerShell commandlets understand what the PowerShell drive actually is. So the change here is really, if you're running a native command and the PS drive path points to the file system, then we're going to resolve that to the actual file system path, and we'll pass that to the native command. So now you can use like Notepad and Nano with the temp drive or other PS drives that you create yourself, and it should just work. In addition, the tilde is something I'm very comfortable using, like a MacBook is my primary machine these days, to reference my home directory. And within PowerShell, that does work. But again, only PowerShell itself understands on Windows, the tilde means the home dir. So the change here again is on Windows. If you have a tilde at the beginning, we'll resolve that to the actual user home path. So now other native commands can actually use it as you'd expect it to work.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of emphasize, once you get used to the tilde, for us Mac users are used to it. Well, once you get used to it, you don't want to let it go, and so you start using it with all of your commands, including the native commands. So this is a huge help. I've got this line in here because we're still talking about native commands, but we have additional problems with native commands. A great example is that command line tools are getting really complex. So when you start looking at some of these tools, it's not just, it's not like ipconfig. It's a simple command, does a couple of things, and that's it. No, these are very complicated commands that manage a very complicated technology. So there's a lot of learning that has to go on here. And this is another area that we're focused on. And I have to say, it would be helpful if native commands looked a little bit more like PowerShell, but not just look like it, but function like it. And let me show you an example of something that we're working on and how I was thinking about this, and see if it doesn't kind of help a little bit. Now, this is a demonstration of a brand new framework, and I'm going to have Steve kind of come in and talk about this, but let me show you what it is that we're doing with that framework. So let me give you an example. I just happen to be on my Mac, and I'm going to clear my screen. And if you take a look here, I'm going to run kubectl. So kubectl is a common command. In this case, I'm playing with kubectl because I've got Kubernetes on Docker. And I want to run kubectl. Now, I can just run it. And what I get from kubectl is, if you've run this before, I get basically a list of, here's some help on how to use me. And there's a lot of stuff here to learn about kubectl. Now, here's the thing, kubectl is an excellent native command. It works really well. And if you're an expert at it, you expect it to work the way that it does. But I'm an expert at PowerShell, and so I kind of expected it to work more like PowerShell. What I was really thinking is when I run a PowerShell command, I expect it to give me something. It helps me discover what I'm working with. So I kind of expected to be able to do, first of all, cube, and then, I don't know, hit the tab key or something. Oh, hey, yeah, get a list of commands that are out there and available to me. And if I want to see something, I can start to work with it from here. And let me give you an example. So I can just dive in. If I wanted to do this with kubectl, let's say I wanted to use kubectl, and this is what I literally had to do. I had to Google around, how do I get a list of pods? So you type in get, and then you type pods. So it's plural. Well, I run this, it doesn't actually show me anything. Now, if you're an expert at this, you're like, well, yeah, I don't really care about the system pods and all that. Well, I didn't know that those existed, except I knew something existed. So this actually kind of bothered me. What I really wanted to do was get cube. I feel so much better that it's a singular now, get cube pod, and it actually shows me something. It gives me that discovery capability. So it's working a little bit more like PowerShell as I would expect. I get a commandlet name. It's producing these great results for me. Now, it just so happens I did jump on Google to figure out how to get a list of the pods. And if I do get pods and I do this all,
you've seen the CTL part, Jason.
Oh yeah, I need the CTL part. Thanks, Steve. CTL part, and do get and pods, and then all, and then namespace. Yeah, I know you guys can see my IntelliSense going off there. We'll talk about that in a minute. Anyways, now I can finally get a list of those namespaces, but man, this doesn't make sense in my brain. It really doesn't work for me. Well, this gets a little bit further. And so I really want this to work more and more like PowerShell so that it'll help me. Another instance that I ran into is on kubectl. I wanted to get the pods again, but this time I wanted to specify a namespace, and I wanted to just get the namespace cube system. So I wanted to do basically a filter. Well, it took me a while, and this didn't make sense, but the filter that I started to work with was, well, why not use get cube pod, and I'll pipe that to where? And I'll just type in namespace in the cube system. And the reason that I know that namespace is available, here's the cool part to this, is if I just do get cube pod, the reason that this worked is, and you know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to pipe this to get member. It's because this is now objects moving down the pipeline instead of just strings moving through it. So I can go through and find the things that I want to filter on, I want to sort on, I want to change my view. So everything that I would expect as a PowerShell user is there, including if I wanted to do things like get cube pod. And you may have seen this flash on my screen already, but if I want to sort something, like I want to sort by the restarts that were in there, it just works. But when I try to do that with kubectl, and I got to point out, guys, I'm not an expert at running kubectl. That's why this was so challenging for me. When I was looking this up, it was all namespaces, and then there was this strange, and I know it's hard for you to see this on my screen. I still don't know what that means, but it doesn't give me what I wanted either. So the focus of this has been, how do we easily make native commands more PowerShell-like? And you already know there are a few ways to do this. You can script wrap it. You can use auto rest and grab a Swagger doc and API wrap it. But there's a lot of maintenance and a lot of updates that involve with that. Steve, can you help us out here? You and Jim and Andrew have been thinking about this for quite some time and are working on kind of a new way to do this. And I think Jim's just released a blog to talk about this. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about what he's doing?
No, absolutely. Yeah, the blog post was just published yesterday, and that was part 1 of 2 parts, and we'll publish the second part later this week. The original question I was asking the team was like, all right, how can we make native commands work even better in PowerShell versus if you use that same native command in Bash, right? And we were brainstorming on different ideas. And Jim really came across a very novel idea where, hey, we already have examples where we generate command lists. Like, we have cdxml, We have like auto rest and stuff like that. And why can't we just do the same thing, generating commandlets from a native command? Because a lot of the help is in a format that can be easily parsed, right? So you start exploring kube control because Kubernetes is very hot right now. And as Jason mentioned, kube control is very complex. It's kind of like a shell within a shell. A lot of commands, a lot of subcommands, a lot of arguments, and all this stuff. It's like it's very hard to learn it if you're not an expert. And one of the things that PowerShell provides is really the discovery aspect, the consistency aspect, the objects and all that stuff. So, Jim spent some time investigating and he prototyped something and said, hey, this actually could be something. So he's still working on it. Obviously, you can see it, we really only expose gets right now. And the intent is really to support like sets and news and all these things that kube control supports. And then Jason also mentioned Andrew on the team, who probably most known for doing like the PowerShell IoT stuff. He's investigating, how do we do this with Docker? Like, what we want to be able to do is take a couple of representative commands, figure out what are all the things we need to kind of generate this stuff, and then generalize it. So now we have a toolkit that other people can use. So now, if there's other stuff like cron tab or syscontrol on Linux, this could be a good way to kind of get a lot of commandlet coverage very quickly on non-Windows versus having a lot individual people or teams building these commandlets. The other big benefit here is we're kind of still exploring how we want to publish this or how to put it into production. Like right now, we have a module that is published on a gallery that actually generates in real time. So what that means is that if you have a different version of kube control, like a newer version, it can actually discover what new commands have been added and you get new commandlets automatically. So this solves one of the main pain points that I've seen in the past where somebody says, hey, I'm going to write a module that wraps Docker. And now someone has to always constantly update it because Docker keeps evolving and the module is out of date, right? So now the module can't do as much as the native command, and that for me is not a good situation to have. So with this real-time generation, of course, by generating it, you don't necessarily get the best experience. It does require some like additional metadata to kind of improve it. Right now, Jim has spent a lot of time on the formatting, getting the objects right, and all that stuff. And the idea here is, can we now have a kind of like an ecosystem where the community can contribute this metadata so that as native commands continue to evolve, people can actually figure out, hey, these verbs or these nouns should be singular versus plural, stuff like that. So we actually have a very consistent PowerShell experience. And the writing of metadata should be relatively easy compared to just writing a whole new module.
Yeah, there's two things I really want to emphasize out of this, of what we're looking at here that Steve said is, one, it's extensible. In other words, we're not going to make all of the commands, and we don't want to. We know we can't. So we want it to be extensible so that you can make the commands, but we want you to be able to do it easier. And the second point is, the idea is that this will be auto-updating. So it'll help you reduce that maintenance that you would normally have to do if you script wrapped it or whatever that you've been doing. So you get a reduction in the maintenance of it, and it's extensible, so you get to add the commands that you want. This is really cool. And just to let you know, not only is Jim putting out the second part to the blog, there's also going to be the show video on this week, probably this weekend, lots of editing. Where Jim explains the internal workings of this. So if you are more into the code side and you want to give us some help with that, that'll be a great conversation. Now, Steve, here's the thing. I'm going to do something this is almost sacrilege. I'm going to exit PowerShell. And the reason I'm going to exit PowerShell is because I want to show something. And Steve, I'm going to let you tell it. I think this story is funny, but I just want to show everybody what it is. When I'm in a Linux shell or on my Mac, I type ls and I hit dash, I hit a tab key, I get a list because I can never remember what all of these things are. So I need some help, right? I get some tab completion help with this. And if I do something like let me clear my screen, if I go up here, let's do grep, same thing, works really well. However, if you do this in PowerShell, you don't get this. And if you do it on Windows PowerShell, you might get I can't clear my screen for some reason. Let me get out of this. Can't clear my screen. If you do this on Windows PowerShell, like with ls, you're going to get information about GetChildItem. So let's see if we can improve this. I'm going to go back into PowerShell, and Steve's got this great story, but I've got a special module loaded that Rob put together. And now watch. Now when I do this, yeah, I'm going to get the same kind of tab completion with my Linux commands in PowerShell. But wait, it gets even better. Of course, I've got menu complete in PowerShell, so I get nice, helpful, easy to use. I hit escape, it goes right back to where I was in line. And so if I do grep and I'm like that, and I can go into menu complete and kind of arrow through it, hit escape, go back to where I was. This is really convenient, Steve. The story of how this came about, I think, is kind of funny.
Yeah, so I'll give some credit. To be honest, I can't remember the name of the engineer at Microsoft who first demoed this, but basically we had a conversation with the WSL team, and one of the things they were doing is how on Windows, like how do you export a bash command so you can use, for example, grep on Windows, and when you use grep on Windows, it actually calls through the WSL, right? So it's kind of a very cool thing that they did, but they wanted to expose it through PowerShell. So one of the things that they figured out is, hey, if we have that, and just to provide some context, like on Linux and on macOS with Z Shell, there's a bunch of completers that the community has provided. So they're all open source. They're the bash completers or Z Shell completers for stuff like git and kube control and all the commands that Jason showed. So the WSL team did this for their proxy functions, and basically, if you're doing grep, then you can actually tab complete in the PowerShell side what's happening on the WSL side. So Rob saw this demo, and then he basically that weekend created this module for PowerShell, on his own, and he kind of showed it to the team the next week. And I was like, wow, this is really good. We should really get this out. We should get this in part of Cloud Shell, because now PowerShell can leverage the exact same bash completers that someone else has already written, right? So we don't need to write these things ourselves. And you get completions for a lot of native commands on Linux that already exist. So I thought that was really cool.
Hey, Jason, we got
I've got
quick
the
question.
module. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so a quick question going along with that from Dave Carroll. It says, auto-generated modules seem like a great idea. What would happen if someone writes code that assumes a specific command will be available, but a new version of the executable actually alters the expected PowerShell command or parameter?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
No, I'll just say, if there's a breaking change in that native command, then you're going to result in a breaking change in the command. It's that's unavoidable. My experience, though, has been that a lot of these open source commands do also value, app compat, so it's unlikely to happen. But if it happens, then you'll have to regenerate the commandlets and you'll have to update your script.
Well, we've got more exciting things to talk about as well. And I just made a mistake. Hold on. Oh. Sorry about that, folks. I just screwed up my screen.
Oh, you did the full screen.
I did the full screen, and I'll never get it back at this point. Let me try one more time. Nope, ain't going to happen. So we'll have to figure it out as we go. So yeah, the native commands and the utility completers, but there's something else. This is some information on the utility completers. You can get the module from the gallery. I was showing you the module on the screen as Steve was talking. So you can grab that from the gallery and give that a try for yourself. Now, something else that we really want to talk about, and we'll see how my screen works now, is Predictive IntelliSense. And this is really something that's very interesting. You've already seen my shell doing it. Let me scroll over to my shell and see if I can. Jason,
I love this one.
So, and I'm going to be kind of brief here because you may have already seen it, but let me just do GetItem. So it may be faint on my screen, but I've got a dark hunter green as my prediction color, and it predicted it for me, and I just hit the right arrow and accepted it, and it runs. So in other words, one of my biggest challenges is I can't type to save my life, and this is actually helping me and accelerating me through it. But it also allows me to learn as I go, and it's making suggestions for me. So let me give you an example. I'm going to do GetChildItem. And as soon as I start typing this, you can already see that I'm getting a suggestion across my screen. I'm just going to accept this suggestion for right now. And then I'm going to move backwards into it and make a change. So this is a suggestion. It came right now from my history. I'm going to change this to, I don't want to look at the property length. I want to look at the property size. And let me get rid of length here. What's going to happen is I'm going to ask it to take a look and see if there's anything else that I have in my history about size. And it does. It finds those things. I can then, whatever it is I want I can just execute it. Well, that's kind of ugly on the screen, but you get the point. So as I'm typing this, I get all kinds of options. I can start scanning my history for all of my get child items and all of the suggestions that are there. I can type in get-c and quickly and easily scan through my history and see other things that begin with a C that are there. As I'm typing, it'll scan my history and give me something that closely matches and help me move quicker. But Steve, this is really cool, and this, I'm gonna go over here and kind of bring this, I think I'm gonna bring this slide up again. There's more to this. Now, folks, I just want to show you that we just released a beta 2 of this. It's available for you on the gallery. There's more to this, and I want Steve to be able to chime in, but I want you just to see in this beta 2, you do have to tell it what prediction source, and the only option you have right now is history. And so I put that in here, but that's what I want to talk about. Is it can be more than just history. As a matter of fact, as you see as the last bulleted item, Steve, this could be extended, and that's what we want to be able to do. What does this mean, extended to other prediction plugins for us?
Yeah, let me mention a few things before I talk about that first. Like, I think the biggest feedback we gotten so far, there's two big feedback we gotten so far for this feature. One is people love it, and why is it not on by default? So I think on the second one, like one of the discussion points that we've had in the team is like, we all love this feature because for me, that I use the Git command line all the time, and I can save a lot of typing because I end up typing the same thing all the time. But I think that for someone who's new to this concept, it can be a little bit jarring because now, it kind of fills out the rest of the line in this kind of like dimmed out view. So I think we need to figure out how to introduce the user to this, or if we have it on by default, how to explain to user kind of thing. So we'll work on that experience. I think the other part that Jason was alluding to is like, this is just really the beginning of a bigger project that we're working on. So the current PSPowerHour 2.1 beta 2, and in fact, beta 1, I think had it originally. It's just the visualization piece. Like we actually have some changes that we're making in PowerShell 7.1 engine itself to allow for extensibility. So the idea is that we want to kind of have this as a peer to our tab completion engine, so that you can actually have different plugins. So imagine like if you're using, let's say, Exchange Online commandlets, and they have this huge amount of ML behind it that they kind of predict, like if you're doing this, you're going to probably do this with these parameters, with these arguments. So we want to allow for them to write a plugin so that if we know that you're writing out a, let's say, for again, Exchange Online pipeline, it could actually have that plugin actually predict the rest of it, right? So it's not always necessarily going to be history, because your history is only going to predict stuff you've done before. It won't necessarily predict stuff you haven't done because you don't know about it. Similarly, we can work with other teams, both inside and outside of Microsoft, to have plugins. So imagine, you have like an AWS plugin or Azure plugin, stuff like that. And this might be a good way for you to kind of learn what you want to do, because based on what other people have done that's successful, they could have like machine learning behind it, kind of predict it. But also, we'll always have like the history one as a default because that's pretty reliable in most cases. But again, that only helps with what you've done before. It doesn't help with what you haven't done yet, right?
So Steve, just to confirm there real quick. So the default prediction source will automatically be set to history once Prius readline version goes production?
No,
that will be the default, or you will opt in?
Discussing that. We haven't closed on that yet. I think there's kind of, again, like there's two sides, right? One is, yes, everyone who is familiar with predictions loves it. But for those who have been using, let's say, classic PS readline, and suddenly see this content, they may be confused. So I think what we need to figure out is how do we kind of ease the user into this new world without don't take it the wrong, like skinning them off, right? So I think until we solve that problem, it probably won't be enabled by default.
We do have this problem as well at work. It's funny how like you really need to be careful what you opt people into automatically or what you give them the option to opt into. Yeah, folks can get a little bit.
It might be interesting, and I'm just thinking out loud here, and I've not talked to Jason about this or Dombo, who's doing this work, is like maybe if you install the 2.10 GA version, there's like a wizard that comes up like, hey, here's what's new kind of thing. And you can step through it in the console to kind of teach them this stuff. Like, I think there's things we could do.
That's great.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize a couple of things that Steve pointed out here. I mean, the because PowerShell, and this has been kind of my theme from the very beginning when we start talking about native commands and errors, the idea with PowerShell is that you don't always know what you're doing because PowerShell is to enable you. So it gives you discoverability, and PowerShell promises you a consistency with how you work with the object. So once you learn how to use where or a sort, you can do that with anything. And the idea here with the predictions is that, yes, if you've already done it, the prediction source of history is going to be a huge accelerator. Like tab completion could accelerate an expert, this really accelerates an expert. But more importantly, getting back to discoverability is with something like an ML provider in here on something you don't know, then if I want to go to Azure PowerShell and I don't really know how to get a VM running, but I know how to start typing it, if it can predict for me the most commonly used ways of getting a VM created and getting it started, that's going to help me discover and learn it faster. So we're looking at it as both an accelerator for experienced people and a learning tool when you need to learn about a particular technology or working with those commandlets. So this is very exciting. The only thing I want to point out is what you're seeing right now is only about half of the solution. Now, in the past, we haven't been able to show this, so I'm gonna see if I can get back to my Windows box to show the second half of this. So imagine you've got these predictions going and you have this ability. I'm gonna go back over here. Oh, I did find it, but I think I lost my mouse, which is, oh man, even more challenging. Let me see if I can get my mouse pointer. It doesn't matter if I'm on that. Okay, so someday, there it is, I got it. So here we go. So I want you to take a look at this. I'm gonna type a command. I've been playing with GetChildItem a lot lately. Now, here's one of the things as a PowerShell person that I always have two consoles open, right? We all know this, right? You got one that you can work in, one that you can get help in. And I got good news on the help one, by the way. Or you've been working in a console and you constantly have a web browser up. Right. Well, that's challenging. What I need to do is be able to look at help and go right back into my work without the disruption of switching to different monitors and all this. So here's one of the things that Aditya has been working on, in addition to what Donga's been working on in the prediction stuff is, well, how about if I just, traditionally you could hit F1 to get help. How about if we hit F1 to get help? And so help just shows up when you need it. Here's the help for GetChildItem, and oh, we have a pager now. I can scroll up and down, and when I quit out of this, it goes right back to where I was. But wait, there's more. For 4 easy payments of absolute free, if I type in a parameter, I can hit F1, and notice it takes me right to the parameter. So I don't have to go searching through that help file. So I can do that. But also, maybe you don't need the full screen of help. You just need a little help. Like I'm sitting on a parameter. I like to know what data type it needs. Maybe I forgot what the parameter was. I'm going to use Alt-H for this, but you can go in and we can get little small help. Very similar to the menu complete help, only this is a little bit richer. And every time I go in and I go back, it takes me right back to where I was. I'm going to type recurse, and I can then, of course, bring up, I forgot where my Alt key was. I can bring that up on recurse. So imagine the predictions and the ability to see your history and to have a prediction model. And this included, we think that this might start getting some traction as being very helpful. But Steve, you want to mention some things about dynamic help? Because I just got this code like last night.
Yeah, it may show up in the next beta of PS3 2.1 as a preview, but I think the main scenario that we're thinking about here is really, imagine you have a very complex pipeline, like what Jason showed is kind of relatively simple, but imagine you have a very long one, and you're in the middle of it, and classically, if you have a limited device where you can't necessarily open a new tab or don't want to open a new browser or whatever, then you would probably hit like Control-C to kind of break out of it and then get some help, and then now you have to type the whole thing again. So the idea here is really, while you're in the middle of trying to author a pipeline, like how can you get the information you need to make yourself successful? And again, we have kind of like the two paths here. We have like the full help using F1. We have the Alt-H experience where we can kind of show you at the parameter level. And this is still a work in progress. We want to get some feedback here to see what can we do to make this even more useful. But yeah, hopefully we'll get a preview of this out soon so people can actually try this out themselves.
And just to make everybody's life simple and not have to deal with me screen sharing anymore, thanks to Steve, this is after Dynamic Help. This is what we wanted to show you. A couple of little notes here. A lot of things that we're looking at in modernizing the shell. Of course, we'll open it up for questions. Is to make you successful sooner, and we really need your feedback, especially at this critical time. One of the wonderful things about PowerShell being open sourced is now we can talk about everything, and this is the time when we can make changes. So I just put a couple of things out here. First of all, Jim's blog, which is hot off the presses, version 1. Also, there's an issue out there on PS Readline to take a look at, and we'll update people as we get more issues and content. I know there's one coming out for native commands, along with the video from the show that's going to be on that. So we'll get more and more information out to you. And with that, let me stop sharing my screen. And Adele, let me hand it back over to you.
We can't hear you.
All right, I think you might be muted.
Helps if I unmute, of course. Thanks so much, Jason and Steve. Thanks so much for all that insight. It's kind of crazy that we actually were able to see features that were coming out internally as of last night. So that's really cool to see. I really love the fish style autocomplete. That's probably my favorite feature, just because my own history. Sometimes, I can help future Adil be a little bit better. So I always like that little feature too. Yeah, for sure. Because sometimes I'll go back to my own documentation internally or my own blog stuff just to try and remember the commands that I ran last time when I did it. James, did you have anything to add?
No, I was just going over to Twitch to see if we had any comments. But yeah, I absolutely love the Predictive IntelliSense.
Yeah, I think we're going to take a look and see. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, no, finish your thought.
Oh, I was just going to say, James, are you just checking to see if we have any questions in the chat as well?
Yeah.
To bring in?
Looking to see if there's anything.
Awesome. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, one of the other things I was going to mention when I was showing you the F1 key to bring up the help and all that, some of you might be kind of like, well, that's great, but, it'd be nice if the help got updated someday. And this has been a long-going problem of updatable help, the challenges that we face across Microsoft in doing that. Some of you may have heard, and we just started this, it's early work, so don't beat me up too much on this. But Joey's been working on this for a long time. We finally are fixing the updatable help pipeline. And just as a point, the core modules for Windows PowerShell 5.1 are the first ones that are on the new pipeline. We're currently working on, showing some love for PowerShell 5.1. And I'll give you an example. If you update your Windows PowerShell 5.1 help, how do you know it worked? Do something that's never been in there. GetHelp on wait debug. All of a sudden, you've got examples and all kinds of stuff. We've had the help. We just haven't been able to get you to help. Anyways, just as another note, we're updating that help, and we're working on 6X and 7X. So we'll keep everybody up to date as we start getting that pipeline up and running. Huge thanks to our docs team and to Joey for fighting this battle. And it's not a battle against fighting another team. It's a complicated process in docs. And so it's been a journey, and we're glad to start to see that come out. So pressing F1 is going to produce you some good results.
Yeah. So actually, going along with that, I got a couple questions. So Joel wants to know. Says, please put the F1 help pager into outhost-paging.
Of course, Joel would say that. Yeah.
So just so you know, the idea is that we want to pull the pager out as a separate command, but it's still early, so I think we'll probably want to use it in other places. Like even GetHelp today relies less on non-Windows and more on Windows, and having a unified paging would also be a good experience. So.
Yeah, and then also another question says, will the F1 help also work for self-created functions?
So I believe it just relies on GetHelp. So as long as it shows up under there, it should. I guess we'll find out.
As long as you format correctly.
Yeah, as long as you formatted your help correctly, I would.
I'm
kind of what I was thinking.
I'm just making a note to test one of my own advanced functions. So.
No, for sure. I will have to say, I really like. I haven't seen that Alt H before. That's really cool too. The little alternate way to get the quick help right for an individual parameter. Because sometimes, when I'm adding them, I'm sort of I just quickly didn't need to check. Is this a switch or,
Yeah, and there are some things that we have to work on. I don't know, if I don't know how many people actually used menu complete and PS readline. This is something that I actually like quite a bit, but we're really enhancing that. And so we've kind of got a couple of things, menu complete, the Alt H. We need to work some things out between these, but yeah, it is an amazing amount of help if you're working interactively at the shell, which I spend most of my time that I do the work there and then I throw it into a script or a function. Yeah, the idea is to be as helpful as possible.
Joel wants to make the menu complete the default everywhere, please.
Of course he does, and that's not necessarily a bad suggestion, but.
Go ahead.
Like, I think this goes back to kind of how do we introduce users to some of these more advanced capabilities without scaring them off? And again, I'm just kind of brainstorming. I feel like we need to have like almost like a message of the day kind of thing, and then have some way to have an interactive tutorial on the console that they can skip, of course. But that might be a way to teach them, hey, guess what? You could be even more productive by using this because you didn't know about it, and we didn't want to just throw it in your face kind of thing.
Steve, and the first thing that is a good idea, but the funny thing is, we users love our configuration, so the first thing you're going to get as soon as you enable that is like, how do I turn that off?
No, so definitely it has to be able to turn off, and also has to be smart enough to know, like, if you already have this enabled and already using it, we don't want to show you something you already know. So
yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
I'll let Jason spec that one out.
Thanks.
It's not like you had enough to
Joel,
do.
I look forward to talking to you.
All right, well, that's all the questions. We don't have any more questions coming into the chat. Yeah, sorry, I have to look over my Mac to see the other.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of moving, so my house is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the process.
James, I want
to
see what your setup is like, because I'm sure you've got all the screens set up in different locations right now, balancing on boxes or something.
Yeah, actually, for the first PSPowerHour, I had I was like on 3 different boxes and a dog food container to kind of keeping everything stable. So at least I'm on a desk this time. Yeah, but I'm in the process of moving.
DevOps Collective.
Yeah, so I'll be in the new house in 2 weeks. So hopefully by the next podcast, I'll be in my new office.
Unwavering commitment. Unwavering commitment, sir. Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, I think that's pretty much our time. We're at about 3 minutes out, but unless anybody has any questions to throw in the chat, let us know. But otherwise, again, this was really, really informative. Thanks for the deep dive, folks, and the cool new preview on a lot of those features, Jason and Steve. And again, thanks for your time. This has been amazing. Again, we do this PSPowerHour every 2 weeks, so we're hoping to get a lot more of PowerShell folks on there, like you folks and additional people. So feel free to stay tuned and stuff. James?
Yes. Let's say, so our next episode is going to be July 7th. It's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm sorry, 2 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be talking with Adam Driscoll and Universal Dashboard version 3 and all the new goodness he has in there. And then also July 21st at 10 a.m. Pacific, we're doing with Don Jones, a shell of an idea, Ask Me Anything. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. So if you're for that, you can go AMA. I did AMA. So you can send us questions. You can use just hashtag shell of an idea on Twitter or up on PowerShell.org/PSPowerHour. You can go down to the event and there's an online forum where you can submit your questions there, or you can ask them live on Twitch, which is also synced to Discord and Slack as well.
All the platforms.
All of them.
Very cool. I will mention real quick that we are rotating those PSPowerHour time to try and catch more folks in different time zones a little bit. That's why we had you folks on a little bit earlier. Thanks for making yourselves available. But yeah, we try and do what we can to try and get time zones. The time zones are hard. We know. Everybody could just use UTC, but that's another discussion.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have this recording up on YouTube hopefully by the end of the week. And then we'll put all the show notes and any of the slides and everything that you guys have for us, and we'll get that link sent out. We'll send it to you guys. You send it out, and we'll send it out on Twitter as well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Oh yeah. So thanks for joining us.
So much.
And, have a great day.
It was fun. Thanks.